watching the Fox Business Network. Here again are Liz Claman and David Asman.
Getting your slice of the American dream not as easily attainable as it used to be. And get this, if you're planning to start a family, your chances may have just gotten even slimmer. That's thanks to new regulations. Banks are making it harder for expectant parents to buy homes.
When I read this, I had to read it 3 times before I could believe it. Joining us now from our L.A. bureaus, Connie de Groot, realtor and broker with Coldwell Banker, and in Naples, Florida, Dominick Tavella, president of Diversified Financial Group. And Dom, you actually had a client who was getting a mortgage modified, and tell us what happened.
Well, in regard to this specific issue, this was a woman, a single mother. She has a 15-year-old daughter, and the bank actually asked for a birth certificate for her children as part of the modification, which is nuts. But in the birth certificate, they saw that she was 15 years old. They calculated out that she would potentially lose her child support 3 years down the loan. They declined her loan modification based on what was going to happen 3 years down the road, the potential for losing her child support.
But
just insane stuff.
But Dom, let's get to the part about expectant families. What are you hearing about that?
Well, this is the same thing. Now, when we used to go for a traditional home loan, they look at your past history. So they look at your credit report and what your credit history was looking backwards. They look at your income, what are your tax returns, the income you expected to make. But now they're starting to look forward and saying, okay, we know what your situation is today. We know what your situation was yesterday. But tomorrow you may get hit by lightning. You may have a child. You're pregnant. You may lose your job. You may not want to return to work. They're trying to factor these types of future issues in today's loan application.
All right. Now, Connie, on the other hand, banks are not nonprofit institutions. Some of the same criticisms were leveled, by the way, at private insurers for not covering people that have long-standing illnesses and so forth. Maybe the government's going to step in. We don't know exactly how those cases are going to be solved because they can't make money off it. So bankers are still trying to profit off of these mortgages. Aren't they entitled to factor these things in?
Absolutely. You know, the banks would be happy to give a loan to Donald Duck if he was well qualified, if he was a low risk. You know, the banks are being conservative, and I think that's, it's harder for people that are pregnant, or have certain special circumstances, of course. But you know what? It's hard for everybody. The banks are very conservative. They do not want more loans to go bad. They have had enough. And we have to decide as a country, as a population, is this necessarily a bad thing? If you can barely squeeze into a home and you don't have enough reserves to maybe make the lender feel a little more confident, or you can't put down a greater down payment, then maybe you shouldn't be buying now. There will be homes to purchase in a year from now, I promise. So maybe you need to save. So I think that it's going to take time before the banks can resolve all the properties that they currently have on their books before they start to loosen guidelines. And we need a stronger job market.
But Connie,
I don't think anybody knew that was going to be this bad at this point in time. Yep.
Connie, clearly we can't go back to the days when you gave anybody that could breathe, barely breathe, a loan. We can't go back to those days. But we have qualified people right now that are really gone through the ringer here, way past what anybody would consider reasonable to get them loan. And that's part of the problem in today's environment, why we still have so much inventory.
Well, yeah, and I would have to say, too, though, Dom, look, I'm actually not so against banks being tougher, because I think that this issue with your client being turned down, while totally painful, that they are actually doing decent, what's called due diligence, Dom, no?
Right.
But Liz, how do we predict the future? Because if you're looking at somebody's tax return and revenue stream, how do you know you're going to have a job 5 years from now? How do you know you're not going to get hit by lightning 3 years from now? You don't.
That's their job.
You have to make logical assumptions on today.
That is their job. That's the job of insurance companies. That's your job of banks, trying to do their best to predict the future.
They're in the best possible position. This is what they do all day long. And you know what? It's not just that the banks are worried about getting a loan going bad. What is it going to do to the individual?
But Connie, what about being outright prejudiced? I mean, I remember I couldn't get a new health insurance deal because I was pregnant, and they flat out told me, forget it, you could die in childbirth. And I was kind of like, oh, thanks. Thanks for that.
I think
Right,
that's
but Liz,
against the
somebody
law.
who's pregnant,
I'm
somebody who
not
takes
for
a
that.
leave of absence because they're pregnant is entitled to disability income while they're absent from work.
Exactly. They are.
For the most part, they do return back to work.
Okay, we got to wrap.
At a comparable salary.
But Dom, you got the first word. Quick last word, Connie. Very quick last word.
These are new times. We are all conservative as consumers. We should spend less and not more. We should be careful until we can comfortably afford something.
And don't worry, it'll swing the other way when everybody forgets.
That's right, it will.
We
Connie,
see it over and over.
Exactly right. Bella, good to see you guys.
Exactly right, Liz.
New financial regulation giving the